Each month, we get together online to learn about a variety of topics related to accessibility. So please follow us on Twitter. We're A11yTalks. That's A11yTalks to keep apprised of upcoming sessions, speakers, and other relevant information. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You should be seeing it streaming right now, so we're right there. And with that YouTube part and the part where we're streaming, please keep in mind that today's session is being recorded. So any questions might get a little bit edited. That said, we want to hear your questions. We want to hear from you. And at the end of today's presentation, we definitely want to be able to field your questions to our speaker and get that over. So go ahead, tag us on Twitter, contact us. Well, YouTube, many of you know us on Slack, whatever. Smoke signals work if I can see it from here. Just we want to hear from you. So that said, our main event. Today we are lucky enough to have with us Alanna Burke. She's a leader in the Drupal community and known for her passion for inclusivity. She's an avid animal lover, and frankly, given the last camp I went to, really cool to hang out with after the camp. So I can't wait to hear her talk, share her thoughts, and her session on humanizing accessibility, because really digital is about people. That's why we're all here. That's why we're into accessibility. And I think you've all heard more than enough from me. So let me turn off my video and hand it over to Alanna. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
That's great.
Okay, so here we are. This is Behind the Screen Reader, Humanizing Accessibility. So as Donna said, I am Alanna Burke. My pronouns are she and her. You can find me on Twitter and Drupal.org at aburke626, and I'm on Drupal and some other Slacks at Alanna Burke. I'm on the leadership team of Drupal Diversity and Inclusion. If you're not familiar with that organization and you're involved in the Drupal community at all, you should check us out. You can find us on Twitter at Diversity and Inclusion. You can find us in the Drupal Slack as well. I'm also a documentation writer / trainer / developer advocate at Amazy.io, where I find myself doing a lot of the things we'll be talking about today. And I'm also really passionate about accessibility. And one of the things I wanted to note, Donna mentioned that I'm very passionate about animals, which I am. And behind me in my office is my cage of guinea pigs. So you might hear a little bit of squeaking as I present. I did try to bribe them with some hay so that they would be quiet, but I can't guarantee it. Okay. So what does it mean to be accessible? What does this mean in our daily life? You know, not just when we're coding web pages. You know, accessible means something close, nearby, something easy to get to, something within reach, something that's easy to access. You know, I'm sitting here at my desk, you know, the pen that's here on my desk, this is accessible to me. This is something that I can get to. The pen that's in my closet, that's not accessible to me. So in the tech world, accessibility is how we design and develop our sites and devices to allow them to be used by anyone, any user with any disability in any situation using any kind of assistive device or software. In order to be accessible, everyone must be able to use your site or device. And I don't care about alphabet soup or guidelines here. I care about humans. And I'm talking about, you know, what you should be doing. I'm also going to say site a lot in this talk, but this applies to websites, products, devices, absolutely anything that you're creating. So, who benefits from accessibility? Literally everyone. Even if you think that you don't need accessibility, Think about the things on websites that annoy you, like bad navigation or confusing UI, unmanageable menus, buttons that aren't descriptive. To many users, those are just minor irritations, and you can find a way around them and go on with your day. But say you're disabled and you use a screen reader, your software counts on that site to be set up, coded, and implemented in a predictable and semantic way. Issues that seem minor to you may make that site completely and entirely unusable to someone else. So when we make the site accessible, we both clear up those minor irritations for everyone else. So it's a win-win. We're going to talk about these 3 modes of disability that have been defined. The first is permanent disability. So these are the things that we tend to focus on when it comes to accessibility. A permanent disability is a complete disability that is constant and it will not go away. Examples here are blindness and deafness. So we think about things like, making our markup semantic and adding alt text, so we make sure that screen readers and text processors can correctly relay the content to the user. But then we have temporary disabilities, like a physical or mental disability, which hinders your discharging of responsibilities for a short time. So an example here would be a broken arm. So that's something that's certainly disabling, but it's not going to last forever. But it might keep you from using the mouse or keyboard, so you're going to need to use text commands to navigate. Or something that I've experienced in the past, maybe you've had a concussion and you find it really difficult to read and concentrate, especially when the text is really dense or small. Then we have conditional or situational disabilities, when you're not able to do things due to the situation you find yourself in. An example here would be a slow internet connection. So these aren't necessarily things that we would call disabilities, but they affect our ability to use the web or devices in an optimal way. Another example might be a parent who is carrying an infant most of the time and doesn't have an arm free. Maybe you're using a library computer which has outdated browser versions and no JavaScript. So these are all things that we should keep in mind when we're developing and making our sites accessible. These are all things that are out of the control of the user, but still affects their ability to use our products. So I'm going to talk about a personal example of how my migraines are affected by accessibility or the lack thereof. And you're probably wondering what migraines have to do with accessibility. And I didn't know until my migraines became chronic several years ago. But when I have a migraine, I'm severely disabled. Text is blurred or nearly double. I need a large, clear font. I need high contrast so that I can turn down the brightness of my screen and still see the text. Ideally, I need a dark mode. I need clear writing and directions. My mind is very foggy, and if the writing is too complex, too flowery, I can't understand it. There are also lots of things on the internet that can trigger migraines. Anything flashy that would trigger a seizure, as well as things like parallax scrolling that move in a nauseating way. I also can't tolerate those sites that have those backgrounds with the diagonal 1 pixel alternating stripe that looks like it flashes when you scroll. I hope that you know what I'm talking about, because I did not want to sacrifice myself to show an example for this site. And you're also probably thinking, like, why are you going online when you have a migraine? Like, go lie down. And I often do. But chronic means I have migraines all of the time. And in a world where we work and live online, I can't avoid it. I have to get things done. And I'm not alone in that. Sick people need the internet just as much as, if not more, than healthy, able-bodied folks. So let's make sure that everyone can use it. So let's talk about stress cases. A stress case is similar to a situational disability. It's something that comes up in an emergency or stressful situation for a user. It's not the same as an edge case. An edge case is technical. This is about people. So let's look at an example. A hospital emergency. Imagine this. You get a call that your loved one has been rushed to the emergency room of a hospital. It's far away. You've never heard of it. You don't know where it is. You have to call the hospital. You need directions. So you Google it. You pull up their website as you're scrambling for your shoes and your car keys. What do you find? I want to preface this by saying that many of the people who are listening to this talk may be experts at Googling with compound phrases, quotes, and operators, but most people aren't. So for this example, we're going to go straight to the site itself. In this example, I'm using my local hospital. I've pulled up the homepage. There's a slideshow at the top, but there's very little information here. It's mostly about top doctors and donations. There's nothing about the ER on the front page. There's no address and there's no directions. I can't start driving yet. Okay, the slide changed. This is about ER wait times. Let's see where it takes me. Now, we're assuming your user saw this slide or waited this long. A slideshow is not a good way to get essential information to your user. It can get interesting or recent information, announcements, and things like that, but not the absolutely most essential information because a slideshow is a game of chance. Okay, so we've clicked on the ER slide, and now we're on the emergency department page. Great, this must be it, right? But there is no mention of where the ER is or how to contact it. There are no calls to action indicating that there is an ER contact page. We still can't start driving. Okay, so there's a hamburger main menu. I open it up. There is still no mention of the emergency department. So now I'm panicking. All right, so now I try the site search, which is the next button next to the hamburger menu. This brings me to the same, I didn't put a screenshot here, but this brings me to the same emergency department page. So what do I do now? I probably call the main hospital number, ask for the address, scribble it down, get transferred to the ER, hope someone picks up. Now I have to type the address into my phone's GPS, hope I got it right. Couldn't I have just found a page with a map, tapped that, and brought it up? These are the kinds of things we want to think about. This could have been done so quickly and so easily to someone in a time of stress. And this example was a very calm one. I don't think that someone who was panicking this much would have even done all of the steps that I did. So how do we fix this? So many organizations want their donation info and announcements and all kinds of things on the homepage. It can be a huge issue, especially with multiple stakeholders. But when you stop looking at it as a competition and look at it as an issue of accessibility, it becomes so much clearer. Don't ask, what do we want to put on our homepage? Ask, what do users coming to our site need to know immediately? And it may not be easy. You may have to fight for this, but fight for your users. This is the good fight and the right fight. XKCD covered this so many years ago in this comic about university websites, and I worked in higher ed then, and I had this in my office for years. We have to think about our users and what they need. I can't tell you how true this comic is about things on the front page of a university website and the things people in this site go looking for. I had actually put this in presentations and shown this to people, saying like, this isn't just me saying this. Look, this is such a popular topic that one of the most popular webcomics on the internet has made fun of it. And I still lost my fight. But don't give up. It's really important. Accessibility is not always about disability. And I think that last example highlighted it really well. So let's talk about that a little more by talking about inclusive design. So inclusive design is the principle that we should design our sites, our products, and our devices so that people with diverse characteristics feel represented and included as users. So you need to think about everyone when you are designing and developing. Let's start with designing for LGBTQIA folks. If your site doesn't need gender info, don't ask for it. If it does, be sure that it does. So I'm not the arbiter of that, of whether or not you need to ask for it. Although for the most part, I would bet that you don't. If you do ask, be inclusive. Do you need their gender or do you need their pronoun? Do you really just need their name? Do you need their legal name or do you want the name they go by? If you need their legal name, like a bank, why don't you also ask for a display name? You know, a lot of people have legal names that are their dead names if they're trans and things like that. They don't want to be called by those names. Lots of people have names they're not called by. It's not hard to also ask for a display name so that when you say, you know, when I log into my bank and it says, "Hi, Alanna Burke," you know, that's a name that I can pick. It doesn't make a difference to the bank what it says there. So why not make that a name that I'm happy to see when I log into your product? You know, you want me to be happy when I log into your product. So make one more field and make me happy. How about gendered icons? And I think I talk about this later. You don't need to have a human outline that indicates a gender. Tumblr and GitHub, they don't have gendered icons. And no one is an other. Other is not a gender. It's not male, female, and other. It's not a good option. If you put other, it means you didn't need it anyway. So why did you ask? Either have an inclusive list of genders, let people define their gender on their own, or just let people add their pronoun and display name. Really think about what you're using this for, why you're asking, and if you truly need it. Chances are you don't. Oh, this is a little bit what we said before. You know, does your site use a gendered or human icon? You know, why does it do that? Do you need one that looks like a little bathroom sign? What does that do for you? And here's the examples. You know, can you just replace it with the user uploaded image? That's what Instagram does. Instagram either gives you nothing, just a little blank circle, or it uses your user image everywhere. Tumblr and GitHub default to these random little images that give no indication of gender at all. They're just weird little random images. These are great ways to handle it. There isn't a reason not to do this. And I talked about this a little bit. You know, using a user's legal display name or using a user's legal name versus a display name. Just ask for a display name. This not only helps trans and non-binary folks, but it also helps anyone who may want to protect their online identity. That covers a lot of people. And if you think this isn't a big deal or it doesn't matter, it does. Think about your own identity. How annoyed you are when someone calls you the wrong name or misspells your name, or has anyone ever called you a Mr. when you're a Mrs., or even a Mrs. when you're a Miss and you get ticked off? The first time anyone ever called you a ma'am when you were checking out at the grocery store and you were like, I am not a ma'am. Or when someone at the dog park says, he's so cute, and you instantly go, oh, she's a girl. Your dog doesn't care if they're misgendered, but humans do. People's identities matter. We care about our identities, and our day-to-day experiences are important. One thing that really gets left out of this discussion is other countries and languages. Unless your site is legally only for residents of a certain country, don't assume that that's where all of your users are from. So many sites are US-centric and only accessible in English, but they're used by people all over the world. And also, if your site is legally only for residents of one country, it should state that, and it should probably only be physically accessible from that country. So, do you provide translations of your site? A big shout out to Drupal for making internationalization ridiculously easy. Or can your site be easily translated by a service like Google Translate? Look, Google Translate isn't perfect, but it's good and it's free and it gets the point across. This has become my passion as I now write documentation professionally all day, every day. Is your writing clear? Is it concise? Or do you use really big words and complex sentences when simpler ones would do? Do you define the terms that you use? Are you using lots of acronyms? I've actually given this talk before, and I went back and looked at it, of course, to rehearse it before I gave it today. And on the previous slide, I wrote, shout out to Drupal for easy internationalization. And I had used the abbreviation I18N for internationalization. And I realized, oh, I don't know if everyone knows that particular acronym. And so I changed it. And that is something that I have become hyper aware of as I write all day, because the things that we write should be accessible. We can't make assumptions about the things that people might know, because we don't know anything. We know very little about the people who are writing the things that we put out on the internet. So I now make a huge point to define all of the terms that I use. If I use an acronym, I define it in parentheses afterwards. I write a lot of citations, I write glossaries, I make sure that I'm not limiting anyone in my writing, and that if people are, unfamiliar with anything, it's all defined, it's all in there somewhere, or there are resources and people can figure out what's going on by, following links, by using the definitions that I provided, because I think, and it's certainly in terms of documentation, like that's what it should be. It should be a resource. It shouldn't just be, here's a few things about this and maybe you'll figure it out because maybe you're familiar with it. So that's something I've become really passionate about, and especially with, the idea of big words and complex sentences, this becomes even harder for people who don't speak, the primary language of what you're writing in. The more clear, concise, and simply you can put it, the easier it is for them to understand. So here's the deal. You're not Dickens. You're not getting paid by the word. And if you are, get a new deal. Your writing has to be readable to everyone. This includes people with low literacy, people whose first language isn't English, people with cognitive issues and disorders. And remember, going back to temporary disability, this can include things like migraines or concussions or other kinds of neurological disorders that come and go. You know, people are going to have a hard time understanding things. Make sure that your writing isn't the barrier here. Websites are meant to convey information, so make sure that's what you're doing. There are times and place for complex, flowery writing, like academic writing. Academic writing is great. If you want to go write essays and write a PhD and a thesis, that is a great place to write beautiful, complex sentences and things like that, because the people who are going to read that are people who are operating at the same level as you. But when you put things out on the internet, you have no idea if that's what's going on. So it's a great idea to use tools like Hemingway app, which helps analyze and simplify your text. I absolutely love and adore this app. It goes through, you can just paste your text in there or you can write in it. And I think there's even a desktop version of it. And it goes through and it analyzes how complex your sentences are at a few levels. It gives you a grade level, and it also asks you to do some things like make things more active, remove some adverbs, tells you, gives you some swaps for various words, and it really takes text and just makes it so much more simple. And I have completely changed the way I write by using this app consistently. I just think it's a fantastic tool and I think everyone should use it. I think it's really eye-opening to just paste some of your writing and your content in there and see what it tells you and get an idea of what you're looking at and your grade level. The general recommendation, I believe, is that nothing should be higher than a grade 9. I tend to aim just sort of as low as possible, and make all of my writing as I try to sort of clear it. I think there's sort of like a red level and a yellow level, and then it's it all comes out white, and I try to make it just totally clear. So that's something that I use in my day-to-day, because I think it's really helpful. And another thing that I wanted to put into this talk, and I put this in here when I presented this in Seattle last year, was a little slide to remember Rachel Lavarro. She passed, and Rachel was a passionate accessibility advocate. And Rachel was also a user of accessible technology, and her passion was really infectious. And she inspired me a lot. I think she was one of my first real life friends who showed me how powerful accessible tech can be for the people who need it. And, you know, I don't want to make it sound like inspirational or something, but I think it's really helpful when, you know, if you're someone who develops for accessibility, I think it can be really helpful to actually see someone use it in the real world and see both how it can help them live their lives like everybody else, but also to see when the limitations come up, how very limiting they can be. And so getting to know Rachel, hanging out with Rachel at DrupalCons, was something that really inspired me to do more for accessibility and become, you know, more passionate and, you know, realize just how important accessibility is. And, you know, we kept in touch a lot online and on Twitter through the years. So she was such a force for good in the Drupal community and the accessibility community and then in the world. And so I want to help keep her memory alive in the accessibility community. a couple of the resources that I used for this talk, Accessibility for Everyone and Design for Real Life from A Book Apart. These are both really fantastic books, as is everything from A Book Apart. So I wanted to recommend those. And a couple of other resources, a post from Medium, why web accessibility is important and how you can accomplish it. And a really great talk that I saw at Kampf in 2017. The talk isn't up, but the slides I believe still are. Building Gender Inclusivity into the Web by Rachel Migraine. She had some really, really great lines in there. Somewhere about, she talked about some stuff like how websites tend to have like men, women, like children and plus size, and how those are the just the 4 divisions of people. And it was just a really great, inspiring and funny talk, and I really appreciated it. So that's all I've got. Do we have any questions, Donna?
It looks like we have a few coming in. I think the first one, and I know the one I'm most curious about too, are if you were to say the top 3 to 5 things that are overlooked when we're working on websites, and, you know, again, best intentioned people, but we're busy, we're rushing through these accessibility concerns, and human usability concerns are overlooked. What are some of those that you've seen, you know, the top 3 to 5?
I think a lot of it is really about how you present your content and how it's written. I tend to sometimes open a website and you see just a wall of text, and it's so hard to read through and understand. So not just breaking up your sentences, but also trying to break up walls of text into smaller digestible bits, so that people can, you know, visually process it. Understanding some of the things around not just fonts and accessibility, but also like, you know, putting things into all caps isn't accessible. Putting things, you know, if you italicize huge blocks of text, that's not accessible. Things like that, things that people think they're doing for emphasis, but is actually having the reverse effect. So I see a lot of things like that, and it actually just makes things really hard to read. So, you know, take your text, use white space, break it up. Also text size, like make your text bigger. It's really hard to make it too big. Just keep making it bigger. That's definitely another one. So just sort of, I think people really overlook how important just the basic visuals of, you know, when you hit a site and you have to start looking at it, you know, what's going on there.
Beautiful. You mentioned earlier, for example, in your own experience, that background that kind of looks like the diagonal line background that kind of looks like it flashes when it moves.
Yeah.
Are there any other, like, that's one I didn't know about. It makes such sense now that you're saying it, but it was one that never would have occurred to me. And I've been, you know, talking about this way too much for years. So the question for you is, are there other things like that maybe, you know, again, well-intentioned people are there other background or imagery or things like that are triggering?
I mean, probably think about all of the sort of cool, slick movements that people try to think of, but so many of them have, you know, can have really nauseating effects on people. I mean, parallax scrolling was one of the biggest ones, and people were so obsessed with that, but it makes people so ill. So I'm not super up on what the biggest web design things are right now, but, you know, sort of examine what kind of movement is going on your site, and whether or not, you know, and so much of it is fluff. And I understand designers needing to demonstrate their skills, but, you know, if that's something that you need to do as a designer because you need a portfolio, you need to show people things, I get that. But try to do it in a way that isn't going to sort of unintentionally show that to people. Like, make a site that says like, this is where I'm doing XYZ, and then link to it from a portfolio so that people are aware of like, that's what's going to happen if I click this link. You know, don't just do it on your personal website where people are going to look at it and not know what's going to happen, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of accidental motion. You know,
Yeah.
when we're looking at sites, a lot of the time we think of background videos and the pause effect and things like that. And that's kind of an accidental, not so much parallax, but that background image you mentioned is almost like accidental motion. So that's a wonderful thing to keep in mind. You know, you mentioned the gender specific icons, and yes, representation is huge. It matters a lot. Are there other ways that accessibility and inclusivity can, you know, be more fairly representative?
I think there's a million, and I think they always have to go hand in hand. You know, I don't think you can be accessible unless you're thinking of all of the people you need to include, right? So I think, you know, to be fully inclusive, we have to be accessible, and to be fully accessible, we have to be inclusive. So I think we always sort of have to be thinking of both of those things at once. And I think that, you know, sort of the people who are passionate about each of those communities really need to do more to come together and sort of share, you know, their concerns so that we can kind of get, like, you know, some of the more, you know, I think people who are so active, you know, like myself in the diversity and inclusivity uh, words, community, you
A long time
know,
talking. Thank you so much for doing this. Yeah, you're just saying that I believe all the people in the community need their voices heard, so that way we can all see each other's perspective. Is that a good
yeah,
summary?
but I was also going to say, like, you know, if you're passionate about, you know, diversity and inclusivity, you know, we tend to operate in a little bit more of a thought space, and people who are passionate about accessibility tend to operate in a little bit more of a tech space. So I think it helps if we can sort of come together and, you know, get some of our ideas sort of applied a little bit more. Because I think, you know, we're going to have each side is going to kind of have, I don't want to say side, but each group is going to have ideas that the other one didn't. And I think that coming together is really the best way to sort of serve everybody.
Awesome. And that leads me directly into the next question. So, yeah, wonderful segue. What would be the number one piece of advice you'd give to somebody who's trying to incorporate these things, maybe even for the first time?
Oh, be open-minded and do some research. You know, write up a, you know, start making a list. I mean, that's sort of what I did when I made this talk, and what I do when I'm, you know, trying to make a site or analyze a site, or anything that I'm working on, and just try to, you know, take a look at every single aspect of what you're doing. Go through it, you know, take a look at the site, go through it piece by piece, bit by bit, and just think about every kind of person, you know, try to make lists of every sort of kind of person you could think of. Try to, and there are lists out there that can help you. So that's why I'm saying also do some research. Make a list of everything, interaction, bit, picture, whatever on your site, and make sure that, you know, you can cross-reference each kind of person with each thing on your site, and that they all work together. So there's a lot of lists and a lot of analysis, but at the end of the day, I think you can, and I'm just a list person, but yeah, I think that that's one of the best ways to really make sure that you're not missing anything.
Awesome. Well, this has been wonderful. Are you giving any upcoming talks, or is there places that members of our audience can see you speak?
I will be giving a group talk with Drupal Diversity and Inclusion at DrupalCon Minneapolis. We'll be talking about the ways that the community can help with diversity and inclusion and being a good ally. And I'll be around. I'm also one of the track chairs, so I'll be around helping people, and we'll have a Drupal Diversity and Inclusion booth. but that's I think that's the only major thing I'm doing at DrupalCon this year, and I don't currently have any other talks lined up, but I have a lot submitted. So
All right, well, we'll definitely have to keep an eye for that. And I am going to be asking you heads up for a copy of some of these links. Normally I try to post them as we go, but as we can see what's on the screen now, a few of them are slightly long and I'm likely to typo. So, but anyone listening will be posting a nice tweet full of all the links. Let me take one more look, make sure there's nothing else I've missed. I don't think so, but if there are follow-up questions, please post it on Twitter, hashtag A11yTalks, A11yTalks. And we'll go ahead and we'll make sure we get all the connection going and grab Alanna in for an answer and maybe even start a conversation. So we'd love to talk with you more. Alanna, thank you so much for your time today. It has been awesome to hear from you. Wonderful to hear your perspective, your knowledge, and your experience. If you'd like to speak on A11yTalks, please go ahead and drop us a message in Twitter, Slack, or, well, as I said, smoke signal if I can see it from here. And we're really glad you joined us today.
I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone. Have a great one.